Hi, listeners, and welcome to this brand new episode of the Tech Your Business podcast. Today on the podcast, we'll be having a very interesting conversation I can see in advance from the discussion we've had so far. Today's episode would be with Pete Meyer. He has my name too. Pete Meyer is a founder and he's a serial entrepreneur. He's founded different businesses in different sectors, in the health sector, and different things. And he's going to share with us how tech has helped him grow these businesses, his different tips and tricks. And we'll just go on straight to the conversation. So welcome to the show, Pete.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad we can at least differ, like we're Peter and Pete.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you don't meet that many Peters. Like you think Peter's a common name, but I met very few Peters.
Really? Funny enough, that's true. All right, so tell us a bit about you. Tell us a bit about your background so the listeners can connect.
Sure. So I've been an entrepreneur pretty much since I got out of college. I worked for corporation for about 11 months. And then I found like a way to sort of work for a company, but have a lot of time to do my own thing. And since then, at that point, I think I was doing like direct marketing campaigns for florist shops and takeout pizza places. I might have made a minimum wage if I was super lucky. I don't think so. I probably didn't. But I learned a lot. And then, I started my first real company, I guess. How old was I? I was 25, I guess. And I've been doing that pretty much ever since. I worked for a very brief period of time. My first company was a .com. So we acted like all .coms. We raised lots of money.
Yeah.
We lost all the money. We went out of business. And then I started working for my neighbor's company in the sort of startup world that we lived in for about a year before realizing, nope, I want to go back and do my own thing all over again.
Wonderful. All right, so we'll talk about productivity first of all. Starting different businesses, you've gone from probably being on your own then to hiring and expanding and everything. So how have you developed the discipline to streamline your operations versus getting distracted, doing things you as the founder are not supposed to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess I've been fortunate that I never started it entirely by myself. I always had at least like one business partner. So we would sort of jump in together, which helps a lot. It helps you from going crazy. And if you run a small company, if you just started it, you could work 24 hours a day. There's always something that you can do. So I think the first thing I had to teach myself was like I gave myself an allotment of I'm going to work from here until then, and then I'm not. And I'm going to do everything I can to be efficient. And that it helped in two ways. One, I wasn't going crazy because you have to have a little bit of time outside your life. Now, in the beginning, I worked from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Now that I'm old and I have 5 kids and I don't do that anymore. But even then, it's like, okay, I put in what I needed. Now I can walk away. But it also created the efficiency of, well, I only have another hour. So I need to actually get this done. And because I knew I could always work, I was like, well, no, I know there's something I have to do, but there's always going to be something I have to do. So I have to put that aside. So that gave me a little bit more of the energy to focus at 7 a.m. the next morning when I plugged back in.
Wonderful. So you talked about always having a co-founder or at least a co-founder when you started your previous businesses. So for those founders who might be lacking in skills and maybe one aspect of maybe one is technical, you're technical and you want to start something, I need someone to handle marketing, or you're a marketing person and you want someone to handle the technical part. What criteria do you use to pick your co-founders?
So in a way, it's like a marriage because you spend a lot of time together. So I think the most important thing is the synergy, is the ability to work well with this person. You don't necessarily have to like them. I actually have liked all my business partners, but you don't have to, but you have to be able to work well with them, to understand them, to trust their professional or technical abilities. After that, you're on, what you said is 100% right. You have to find someone who is complementary to you in some way. If you're both too heavy in one direction, then that can cause problems. For example, one of my business partners for BCM, I mean, we've been in business partners for almost 20 years now.
Wow.
He officiated my wedding. He's one of my best friends in the world. But we are both pure optimists, don't worry too much about like the fine details. So we always had to be super careful that we would get someone on our team, even if it's like a part-time person, like that we pay to worry for us, and that we listen to what they have to say, because they'll be saying something that we don't want to hear, but we have to know our own biases enough to say, oh, wait, they're telling me I should worry about this. I really should probably worry about this.
Wow. All right. So for some businesses at different stages of their growth, there are different things that they need. So as businesses scale, what are some common technological pitfalls that they can encounter that can cramp these growths? And how can these pitfalls be avoided?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's hard. It's one of those things. That's why most things are difficult. It's easy to make mistakes in both directions. It can be, okay, this is the pie in the sky. This is what I really want. And it may be what you need in 5 years, but it's not what you need right now. Or you can sometimes choose things where, okay, this is really cheap and it does what I need to do at this second, but then you can't grow with it. And it's like the hard part is finding that mix of, this isn't going to break my bank. This isn't going to make my, my budget not work, my overhead not work, but it gives me the ability to grow for a certain period of time. I mean, there's almost nothing when you are sort of still in that jungle phase of a startup that is going to be making sense when you're on the highway. But you do want to sort of get it to the next stage. Because to be able to predict where you are 3 stages in advance, it's just not going to happen.
Definitely.
I joke with people that here's the plan. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is exactly what I'm saying here isn't going to happen. Anything else is open to possibilities.
Yeah, true. All right. So growing your businesses too, what are some of the biggest tech issues you encountered while rapidly expanding those businesses, and how did you overcome them?
Let's see. So, I mean, the business I had that was growing the fastest was a brand that we launched for BCM Direct. It was called Wellness Watchers. It was a wellness program, and it was growing so quickly, and it had a lot of customer support issues. And we initially sort of built our customer support internally, and that really wasn't working. Like, it was scaling too quickly for that. So then we found something that we could sort of plug and play and solve that problem. It was an external provider, and it solved it. But then the variable cost on that was very high. So that solved the short-term solution, but then our costs were really ballooning. Eventually, we found a technology that allowed us to actually have reps that were dedicated to us around the world, that gave us sort of the cost efficiencies and the flexibilities. But we had to make a mistake too much in one direction and then too much in the other direction, and then sort of find the solution in the middle, which we ultimately got to.
All right. So you mentioned that you rely heavily on testing different things to arrive at the path you choose to go. So what are some examples of some impactful tests or experiments you've run?
So, I mean, we test everything. And it's very humbling, but it's very important. If we can test it, we should test it. So, I mean, on a website, it seems obvious, although most people don't do it, of just to be testing every component you have on a landing page. A/B testing, multivariate testing, test different technology approaches, test different, try to have, when you hire a new employee, we'll often try to hire 2 if especially if they're remote, and let them know like, hey, we're not hiring you as an employee, we're hiring you as a contract for 60 days, and then determine how effective they are. Because what I found is I can't tell much in an interview. I can tell that we might really like we communicate well, but it's hard for me to tell, are you just really good at selling me, or are you actually really good at what you're doing? So whenever possible, we initiate an A/B test in whatever we're doing, which of course is not always possible. But when you can, you do it because, I joke that like in baseball, if you're right 3 out of 10 times, you're really good, which means you're wrong 7 out of 10 times. And you got to just like, if you can make those mistakes small, then the 3 that you're right more than makes up for the 7 that you're wrong, as long as you figure out how to test that in the smallest way that you can. So that's why I was saying for like a new employee, you don't make them an employee. If you can, you make them a contractor for 60 days. If you have a new technology, if you can, you test them both. And of course you can't always. Sometimes you just do it, get as much information you can, and just running a business is always making decisions with not enough information.
True. Like they say, jumping out of the plane and looking for the parachute on the way down.
Exactly.
All right. So in this test, you talk about, especially for the websites and other things, how have you leveraged tech to make these tests? What tools have you found valuable?
So again, like it really relies on sort of the volume that you're doing. So for example, on websites, there are high-end testing like BWO, I know is one that we've worked with, where they can do everything you could possibly need it to do. But I think like the starting is like $1,000 a month, which for some companies is like that's nothing. For other companies, like wow, I can't afford to do that on testing on my site. So like when you have, it's often good to say, okay, I know I want to test this kind of traffic. Here is a jerry-rigged way that I can do this for $200 a month and some spreadsheets until I figure out if it helps me. And then I put in the investment for the year contract at $1,500 a month. So we've done both. VWO actually is a really good platform. I recommend them. But we've also done where we can just split URLs and we see what goes to it and we enter it into a spreadsheet and we record the performance of this. So you actually create 8 different versions of the page with like 4 different variables that change on it, and you split between all of it and you calculate on the back end. Sometimes that's the right answer and sometimes the full platform is the right answer. And you just have to figure out when to do one and when to do the other. And for some solutions, you want to do the jerry-rigged, and for some solutions, you want that, I know I can trust this and scale with it.
All right, great. All right, so growing your business too, you might have come across times where you're growing and, like you said, you have to acquire software or acquire technology to assist in that growth. So what are the metrics you've used? What are the KPIs you've monitored to inform the decisions on the tech or software that you'd acquire to grow your businesses?
So, I mean, if it's like a prepackaged software, that's usually, well, I guess for something like we were talking before about recording websites, it is easy to track because you will look at, these are the gains that I now know that I'm converting at 43% better than I was before, and my revenue is this, so therefore I'm making far more than I'm spending. In a lot of other places, it's not that cut and dry. But there's usually some level of efficiency you can look at. So on the customer service side, you can look at, okay, I've implemented a new IVR, which is when they call in, they have to enter 1 for this, 2 for that, and you have a tree that you go through, and you can look at if you're able to do an A/B test in the moment, that's great. Sometimes you can't, but you can look at what my refund rates before, how much time were my reps on the phone before, how much was it after, and you can calculate the difference there. So there's usually some level of either cost or revenue that is associated with it. For hiring an outside contractor, that's harder. That's more, I would say, intangibles. That's more of, I wanted them to achieve this. They hit this obstacle. They overcame it. There's like a lot more. It's less of an ROI and more of um, your experience with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So for entrepreneurs just starting out in business, what's basic, especially looking at the tech available these days, what basic tech stack would you advise them to implement early on to streamline their operations and to help them do more?
So, what I always tell people is figure out what's core for your business. Figure out like what is the most essential thing for you to achieve for success. What are the things that take a lot of your time away from achieving that? And you want to, both for people and for technology, you want to figure out how much you can outsource those non-essential so that they're not taking too much time and money away from your main goal, and what can you invest for that main goal. And that's going to be different for every business. So let's say, we work with a number of companies in the health space. Let's say your main goal is to get into stores. Then like you have to figure out how to, like, you find a small chain and you get your product into the store and you work with them and you go and you see how it is on the shelf, and your whole main focus is there, while your website is not going to drive a large portion, but you need to have it because it looks better and it does provide some revenue. Like, you want your attention to go to the stores if you think that's what's going to be the main driver for your company, and you want to figure out the most efficient, most cost-effective way to have the other part work well enough.
All right. So still talking about that, you've talked a lot about prepackaged software solutions and everything. So for businesses, a lot of times they have the option of either buying prepackaged software or building custom software for that particular problem they want to solve. So what factors do you advise that they look at to make that decision between building or buying? And when does it make sense for them to customize, to build what they want to use or buy?
So I mean, we did plenty of both. So there are definitely advantages of either. I would say if your core needs are really standardized, like you're setting up a web store. I mean, people have optimized and maximized a web store. Like you're not going to recreate that wheel. So you just sort of take that's where you take the built-in solutions, you plug in your products, you modify it, you get an expert to optimize it, but to recreate that doesn't make any sense. But if you have something that doesn't plug directly into that. So like for Healthy Finds, we had a membership program, and our goal was to get people to sign up for the membership. But then as a membership, they needed to sample. We built a whole custom platform for that because it wasn't a normal store. Like it was a member sign up page, but then on the back end, they sort of have like this custom store thing. So the team that we had that developed it used some packages, but we couldn't just like plug into a Shopify because because what we do was too unique for Shopify to have something to apply for. So if you're a small business, if you're just sort of like a franchise, and probably as much, not technically a franchise, but like let's say you're doing something where the business model is established, the market is established, and you just have a new product for that. You want to do probably as much pre-built stuff as you can. If you're trying to come up with a new business model, then you're going to have to do more custom work, because your new business model, like the pre-packaged stuff is built for existing business models. And if you have a new business model, you're going to have to create new platforms for your new business model.
Yeah. All right. So this year has practically the rave this year has been about AI. Sometimes I say it's probably the year of AI this year.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on AI and its impact on business and entrepreneurs and
Yeah. So, I mean, I know what I've read, and then I sort of know what I've sort of experimented with myself. I mean, so I have my wife and I have 5 kids between us. It scares the crap out of me how easy it is to write an essay in like 45 seconds. That scares me. Um, and I know that, like, looked at some of the customer service and the bots, and they've gotten so much better. And I imagine in 2 years they're going to be dramatically better than they are now. And so you have to sort of look at, because I think in a lot of places AI isn't good enough yet, but it's gotten so much better so fast that within 6 months or a year or 2 years, it is going to be good enough. So,
yeah,
like, we have to incorporate it now so that we learn with it, so that when it gets as good, that's not when we're learning about it, because then we're behind the times and like other people have an advantage over us. And because that's what I've experienced. And that's what, like, I've looked at AI for customer service and for like testing performance on websites. And in both places, I find it not as good yet.
yeah,
Um, but I want to learn about it and keep up with it for the reasons I just said. So that there are places where it already helps. Um, but if I'm not working on it now, I'm sure it's going to be there, and then it's going to surpass it in a very small time frame.
nice. All right. So, from your experience, what tech skills would you advise entrepreneurs to prioritize on developing, even if they have technical teams, even if they have a technical team in place? What tech skills would you advise that they develop themselves?
So none of my businesses have been pure technology plays. So that's hard to say, because I was always part of sort of developing the technology as a non-technologist, but I never knew. I guess it's funny. I mean, the very beginning, um, the first brand that we launched under BCM Direct, I still didn't build it, but I managed each individual area that built it, so I knew how to fix it. And then later, I just knew who to call, which is a little bit frustrating. So, I mean, that's a little bit. There was never a time when I did the coding or did the technology myself.
Yeah.
I would say that it's very important that you're involved in the process, even if you're not doing the technology, because if you are on the tech side, then you're obviously going to have a better understanding of both sides. But if you're not very, very closely involved with your tech team, they're not going to have the same vision of what your business is going to be that you are. And if you just say, hey, go do this and hand it off, and then wait a few weeks or whatever period of time and then see where they are, they're going to have to go off on a little bit of tangent, just because that's the way people are. And that's how projects are. So you need to be intimately involved, even if that will slow them down a little bit, and you can overdo that. Like if you micromanage someone in an area where you're not, you're just like, that doesn't work either. So you have to find, again, that fine line between the two of, you need to be involved so that you know they're going for the goals that you want, and not too involved that you're just making it impossible for them to do what you want them to do.
Amazing. All right. So since the pandemic, remote work has been the new thing. It has been something that a lot of businesses had to do. And now I tend to see a lot of businesses trying to get back to the office and all that. So when you look at your business before remote work and after remote work, what would you say was the effect of remote work on productivity and everything else?
So I used to be that weird guy who worked from my office, and now I just a lucky guy who has an office at home. So we were more remote than most companies before COVID hit. So for BCM and Healthy Fines, we had, I don't know, I feel like 16 or 18 employees, but we were over 3 continents.
Well,
And it wasn't like, I don't think we had more than 3 people in one place. So we were already remote. So we had a fulfillment section. Obviously, that was the one in place area. But that was in New Jersey. I'm in Maryland. My business partner's in California. We had an office in Texas, so we had 2 people there. A lot of our staff was in Serbia, actually. And then development we had in India and Pakistan, and then our customer support, not fulfillment, but support was more Thailand and the Philippines. So we were ahead of we were ahead of our time.
All right. So if you could go back 10 years to, no, not 10 years. If you go back to the beginning of your career to advise your younger self, to give yourself just one piece of advice that you believe would give your younger self the fastest path to where you want to be, what would you tell your younger self?
So, I mean, this is a little unique. I actually would advise my younger self to sort of, so like, my original plan was I'm going to get an MBA. I just started a .com instead. I never got the MBA. I probably should have stayed in corporate for a little bit longer, just so that I would understand the needs of corporations better. But so I would say, like, the corollary of that, which you often hear frequently, is always try to think bigger. The most successful entrepreneurs, and I think that was part of my limiting factor, and probably because I went solo so quickly, is I was thinking smaller. I'm going to work with this smaller little guy and this little guy and this little guy, and it's more effective to it's more effective to go elephant hunting than to kill a lot of rabbits.
All right. So when you look at what we've discussed so far, and I know if we have to talk about everything about tech and business, we're going to be talking for probably all weekend, all week. So if you feel there's something the listeners would find valuable knowing and that you'd like to leave them with, what would those parting words be for the listeners?
So if you're an entrepreneur, just it's the day in, day out that makes a difference. Like, we think it's the idea that matters. It's really the execution and the overcoming the daily, weekly, monthly obstacles. And every obstacle that we overcome, we get better at overcoming obstacles. And just keep at it. It's a lot of fun and a lot of work.
Definitely is. All right. So thank you so much for coming on the Tech Your Business podcast today. Thank you for coming to share your expertise, your experiences, your thoughts, and everything with us.
I really appreciate you having me.
All right. And for the listeners, thank you for being with us on this episode of the Tech Your Business podcast. I really love episodes like this where we have guests who have a lot of experience to share with us. And I think, like I said previously, a lot of things we've shared, I'm sure maybe 1, 2, 3, or even more would be applicable, would grow your business, would make a big difference. And if it does, don't forget to reach out to Pete. So one more thing, if listeners want to reach out to you, or they want to learn more from you, or they want to connect with you or anything else, how can they reach you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, just Pete Meyer in Bethesda. You'll find me there. I'm happy. I love talking to entrepreneurs. So anyone wants to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. And maybe there's something we can do together. Who knows?
Definitely. All right. So you've heard that. It's going to be scrolling at the bottom. If you're watching it on video, or if you're reading, just go into the show notes. You're going to see the link to Pete Meyer's LinkedIn profile. So till next week, when we are back with another episode of the Tech Your Business podcast, don't forget to apply. Very important. Apply what you've learned from this episode. Bye for now.